Hello, True Health Seekers, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Today's guest is going to blow you away. In fact, his family has probably touched your life in some way. If you've ever eaten one of the delicious 31 flavors of ice cream that Baskin-Robbins serves, then his grandfather has touched your life. My guest today is Ocean Robbins, and I am so inspired that his entire life he's been dedicated to helping people live a healthier life through sustainable agriculture and through a whole foods diet. And he looks to merge the mission of saving our planet and saving our health because they are one and the same. And he has some great information that he shares today in our interview. You know, I actually discovered Ocean Robbins. I knew about his father who had the opportunity to carry on the legacy of Baskin-Robbins and refused to do so, and instead turned to a more natural lifestyle and promoting healing. And actually, Ocean shares an amazing story where it all comes full circle, and the work that his father did ended up saving his grandfather's life, the co-creator of Baskin-Robbins. So you'll look forward to hearing that today in our interview. But I first heard about Ocean Robbins through Ty Bollinger's work with The Truth About Cancer and the Truth About Cancer Live Symposium. Now, this week, Ty Bollinger has released for free the ability to watch the 9-day docu-series, The Truth About Cancer. I have shared in past episodes how much this docu-series has changed my life and changed the lives of my loved ones. I highly recommend, since 1 in 2 women in their lifetime currently in the United States and also in Canada, so I imagine in other countries as well, the statistics are quite similar, will have a diagnosis of cancer, and 1 in 3 men. This is absolutely unspeakable. It is horrible, and we need to put an end to this. So if you want to learn from the leading experts, in fact, 131 experts from around the world that regularly cure cancer naturally using alternative science-based medicine, if you want to learn from them on how to prevent cancer and how to treat it and how to overcome it and how to fight it and how to beat it and how to spread this information and not only beat cancer, but how to thrive and live healthy and live so you're drug-free and you're vibrant and you have a perfect immune system and you wake up every day full of energy and vitality and you feel years younger than you are and you achieve your healthy weight. If you want that for yourself and your loved ones, I highly recommend you learn from these experts. You know, if you love my podcast and love learning from the experts that I have on the show, you are going to be blown away by Ty Bollinger's The Truth About Cancer. And right now it's free, which is like, how can it get any better than that? So please visit learntruehealth.com/cancer. That's learntruehealth.com/cancer. Even though he started airing it a few days ago, there's still several days left for you to view it. Learntruehealth.com/cancer. Put in your name and your email address, and he will email you every day with the live streaming of The Truth About Cancer. Now, if you're moved like I am by any of his videos, buy the DVD set. He gives it at a very affordable price, and you can also buy the entire digital download library and the transcripts and everything, the audios. I recommend you do that because there might come a time in the near future when one of your loved ones is faced with this diagnosis, and you can gift them or you can lend them this set, which will absolutely help them. You know, when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, I didn't have any tools. I didn't have any resources. I felt so helpless. My dad and I felt like as small as mice. We felt so ineffective and so hopeless. And I wish I could have had half the resource that The Truth About Cancer provides for those who are now looking to create their care in the face of a diagnosis of cancer. So please go to learntruehealth.com/cancer, put in your name and email address, watch The Truth About Cancer, share it with everyone you know, share learntruehealth.com/cancer with everyone you know. You may not know that one of your friends or family even has cancer. You know, my mom, up until her deathbed, did not tell very many people, only just a small handful of people. When she passed away, all of her girlfriends who loved her so much were in shock because she didn't want to tell anyone. And so you may have someone suffering and suffering alone. And so share this information with them. It might change their life. LearnTrueHealth.com/cancer. Enjoy today's interview. It is about how we can revolutionize our health and the planet and how they are so connected. You're just going to love Ocean Robbins. Enjoy. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 150. I am so thrilled to have with us today Ocean Robbins. He is such an inspiration, and I just know you're going to love learning from him. Ocean, it is such a pleasure to have you here today. Your family has touched my life in many ways. When I was 6 years old, I was very sick, and my mom, through advice from a naturopath, decided that we went dairy-free, sugar-free, and wheat-free, and yeast-free in our household. So the one treat a year I got to have once a year was Baskin Robbins. But I grew up so healthy, eating like really how we should all eat. And I think it's okay, once in a blue moon, as my naturopath said, to treat ourselves. Jamocha almond fudge, what was the flavor? Or if it wasn't Jamocha almond fudge, the second best was that German chocolate cake, whatever flavor, and I can still remember it. It's just so funny how these memories touch our lives. And so your family, touched my life in a beautiful way. I had great memories of sharing that with my mom, but we did it in a very responsible way. And as a kid, I didn't know that. I didn't know the difference. But now I'm so thankful I didn't, grow up on sugar and on dairy like so many families are. And it changed my health overnight. I went from being sick all the time as a child to being what we should be, which is fully vibrant. I didn't have any infections or any colds until I was 13 years old, and I decided to get rebellious and eat Halloween candy, and I immediately got sick and proceeded to get infections, and that was the first time I was ever on antibiotics. And as a 13-year-old, I was going, wow, there's a really huge correlation between sugar and junk food and our body's ability to maintain health. It's amazing.
It's so true. There's a saying, food is the foundation of health, and it's actually more true than we realize. We have, tragically, a medical system that for the most part acts as if food didn't really matter. And simultaneously, we've got a food industry that for the most part acts as if health didn't matter. But what we know is that food matters and health matters, and our lives are on the line. And so I'm so glad to have this time to talk with you a little bit about food, about health, and about the food revolution.
Absolutely. Yes. I'd love to start by you sharing your story with our listeners. Those who've never heard of you, they absolutely have heard of Baskin Robbins, and so they definitely know where you come from. But I'd love for you to share your story and what led you, what inspired you to first create Youth for Environmental Sanity, and then go on to create the wonderful food revolution.
All right. Well, I'll go back a couple generations. My grandfather founded an ice cream company, as you've mentioned, called Baskin Robbins. And my dad, John, grew up with an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in the backyard and with 31 flavors of ice cream in the freezer at all times. And he was groomed from early childhood to one day join in running the family company. He invented Jamocha almond fudge. So
there you go.
For your favorite flavor growing up. And a lot of other flavors. But as he came of age, he ended up being offered the chance to join his father in running the family company and inheriting a company that would have brought him immense wealth. And he said no. And he walked away from a path that was practically paved with gold and ice cream to follow his own rocky road, as we say in our family. And one of the major impetuses for that was that his uncle, Bert Baskin, who was my grandpa's brother-in-law and business partner, was dying of heart disease. He ended up dying with a heart attack at the age of 54. And, my dad's Uncle Bert was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in American history. He had tremendous wealth. He had a family he adored, but he didn't have his health. And he left his wife a widow and his kids fatherless. And my dad looked at that and said, what's it all worth? All the ice cream in the world, all the money in the world. What's it worth if you don't have your life? And so he decided he wanted to do something else with his life. It took him a little while to figure out what, but in time he moved with my mom to a little island off the coast of Canada where they built a one-room log cabin and practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day and named their kid Ocean, that being me, of course. And I jokingly say that you can tell the generation my parents came from by virtue of my first name. I grew up monetarily poor, but I grew up with healthy food and a lot of energy. I ran my first marathon when I was 10 years old. And when I was about 12, my dad started working on a book called Diet for a New America. It came out in 1987. And it became this runaway bestseller. It's about how our food choices affect our health and our happiness and our world. And the media had a blast with the story. They called my dad the rebel without a cone. Here's this would-be ice cream heir who becomes a advocate for healthy food. Of course, everyone wanted to ask, well, what about your dad? They would always ask him. And this is where the story gets really interesting. You see, my grandpa initially was just devastated that my dad didn't take over the company. He ended up selling it for a pretty hefty chunk of cash and retiring. But he was bitter because he had dedicated his life to building this company and he wanted it to carry on. And now he had to let it go. And he blamed my dad for it, and they didn't speak for many years. But as it happened, around 1990, my grandpa was facing some serious health problems. He had diabetes, he had high blood pressure, he had major weight issues, and his doctors told him that he didn't have long to live unless he read this book and followed its advice.
Oh my
Guess what? They handed
gosh.
him a copy of Diet for New America.
No way.
So my grandpa read it, and he changed his diet, and he got incredible results. He lost 30 pounds. He got off all of his diabetes and high blood pressure medications. His golf game improved 7 strokes. He wound up adding 18 more healthy years to his life. And what he did was he cut down on meat consumption. He stopped eating sugar and ice cream altogether. And he ate a lot more vegetables and whole foods. And, this was a pretty big step for him to take. This was a man who had manufactured and sold more ice cream than any human being who had ever lived on this planet. And I say, you know what, if he could make a change like that, then I think there's hope for the rest of us too. So we've seen in our family what can happen when we follow the standard American diet. And we've also seen what can happen when we make a change. And that has burned a place in my heart that lives on forever. I want to help more people take advantage of the kinds of changes that my grandfather and millions of other people have experienced when they are able to shift their diet and change their life. I've seen my dad received over 100,000 letters in response to his book from people who were inspired and had their lives changed. And as those letters were pouring in, I said, what can I do? And I ended up founding a nonprofit organization at the age of 16 to reach out to my generation, called it YES, or Youth for Environmental Sanity. And we traveled across the U.S. and around the world and reached more than 650,000 students speaking in school assemblies. And in time, also holding events for young leaders in 65 countries. And as I traveled the world and directed that nonprofit for 20 years, I saw that everywhere I went, people eat. And that what people were eating was having this enormous impact on their health, on their communities, and on the world around us. I saw that KFC and McDonald's and Baskin-Robbins, as well as Monsanto and industrialized agribusiness and pesticides and factory farms were all spreading around the world, originating from my country and spreading globally. And I saw that as this system of growing and producing and preparing and processing food was spreading, waistlines were expanding, cancer rates were going up, Alzheimer rates and heart disease rates and diabetes rates were going up, hospitals were filling up, medical bills were going up, families were getting bankrupted, and more people were suffering with chronic disease. And so after 20 years of directing that nonprofit and working with young leaders globally, I said, you know what, it's time to work directly with my dad and help take this food revolution message to the modern era. He'd written books. They'd been wonderful. They'd inspired millions of people. But I wanted to go to use online technology. So we ended up launching the Food Revolution Network in 2012. And we've reached more than 1 million people through our live online events. And, we're just getting started. But what we are seeing is that all over the world, people are hungry for change. They're fed up with toxic food. They're ready to make a difference. And they're changing their lives. People are so sick of being sick. And that gives me immense hope because I see how bad things are. And we can talk about that a little bit if you like, about how toxic our food system has become. But I also see how much better they can be with a change. And that fills me with so much hope.
I love it. I just love the mission you're on. I feel like you're like the male version of me in a way because I'm on the same mission. I'm right there with you, helping people to see. I don't want to say like wake up. Like I don't. My listeners are so smarter than the average bear, but help them to see that, like you said, how toxic our food supply has become and how easy it can be to make the small changes like shifting to make sure that you're GMO free, to make sure that you're organic when possible, to increase vegetables. And by increasing vegetables, you're crowding out and you slowly eat less of those foods that would be filled with sugar, like processed foods and grains, and eating more of those whole foods like legumes, nuts, seeds, things that I like to say one ingredient foods. You look at it, you're like, there, one ingredient, broccoli. That's broccoli. I'm going to eat it, instead of this thing where there's 20 preservatives because it comes in some weird package, and helping people to see that, I eat a whole foods diet. And honestly, I've been, I don't know why, but reflecting lately in my 20s when I finally left home after, college, and I moved to the States from Canada. And because of I was offered to be a sales manager for an international training company. And so here I am in a new country, in a new city. I don't know anyone. I'm free. What do? I eat KFC for the first time in my life, and I eat junk food and fast food. And I just could not believe what I used to eat in my 20s, because now being in my 30s, I eat a whole foods diet and almost zero processed food. And I feel healthier now than I did 10 years ago. And it's funny because you think when you're in your 20s, you should be just fit and just jump out of bed with tons of energy. I couldn't get out of bed in my 20s unless I had a quadruple shot latte to get me going in the morning. And now I jump out of bed full of energy. And I know it's because I'm not eating all that junky food, definitely. And I want so many of my listeners who are needing coffee, for example, and needing sugary drinks, to get them out of bed in the morning and to get their brains going, to know that by doing something simple like changing their diet, it can completely change their energy and also help change the planet, right?
Yeah.
You talk about the impact that our food choices have on the planet. Now, before we get into that, I want to ask, I'm really curious, when you so you were running, yes, like you said, for 20 years, Youth for Environmental Sanity.
Yep.
Was there a moment, like an aha moment, when you said, I'm going to do this thing called the food revolution? Like, was there an aha? Like, how did it dawn upon you? And where was that inspiration point?
Well, interestingly, there was a moment in 2008 when we had an economic crisis. And around that time, gas prices shot up around the world. And a lot of countries were struggling with food security issues. And I was facilitating an international gathering around that time, and one of my co-facilitators was from Senegal, West Africa, and she was explaining to me that in Senegal there was starvation spreading very fast because the price of rice had doubled, and the reason it had doubled was because their rice was their primary staple food in Senegal, and they imported it from Vietnam. And I said to myself, I asked her, well, why are you guys importing all your basic staple from Vietnam. And she said, oh, because of French colonization, the French wanted trade between all the different colonies. And so they encouraged rice to be a staple, even though we can't grow rice in Senegal because it takes too much water. And then I asked a little deeper, and it turned out that the farmland in Senegal was mostly fallow. People were unemployed, but they weren't growing food there because they couldn't grow rice and there wasn't demand for millet. And I said, wait a second, so did your people traditionally survive on millet? She said, yeah, that was the traditional staple.
Oh my gosh.
And we can grow millet in Senegal, and we have people starving to death, and we have rampant unemployment. And what the government is doing is taking our tiny limited pool of tax money and using it to subsidize importation of rice.
Oh, what?
So that people won't go hungry.
That is insane.
It is. And I said, this is insane. And, you know, we talk about local food and local living economies. And sometimes we think of it like it is some kind of elitist luxury, like foodies who don't mind spending, you know, their whole paycheck for Whole Foods will go out and, you know, have their little local chic this or that and feel like they're helping save the world, while really they're just indulging in luxury. But the reality is that sometimes local food and local food systems are necessary for survival.
Mm-hmm.
And we think of it as if healthy eating sometimes was an elitist luxury the poor cannot afford. But as I worked with people all over the planet, I realized that the way we eat in the United States is, in a sense, stealing the water, the topsoil, the food from hungry people now and in future generations. Because we have a food system today that is low in nutrients, but incredibly high in processing, incredibly high in carbon impact. We are chopping down tropical rainforests so we can create grazing land for cattle, so we can have cheap burgers, so that we can grow soybeans, genetically engineered soybeans in Brazil, so that we can feed them to our livestock. We are wasting massive amounts of the world's resources to produce a diet system that is also killing us. And so I realized then that I could probably be most effective helping Kumba's people, not by trying to go to Senegal and volunteer on a farm somewhere, though I respect all the people who do that, but by coming to the United States and helping to challenge the underpinnings of a global food system that has made profits for a few more important than health for humanity, than the viability of civilization itself and the well-being of future generations. We've got a food system in which we have somehow said that the only goal of our food industry is money. Now, the way I look at it, Food 1.0 is about survival. If you can get enough calories to fill your belly, then that's success. And for some people in Senegal and many parts of the world, that's the goal. Food 2.0 is about commerce. In Food 2.0, the central organizing principle is buying and selling goods. And that's what we have mastered in the United States today. Unfortunately, Food 2.0 is morally bankrupt, which is why I say we need to move to Food 3.0, where the central goal of our food system is health. Health for our bodies, health for our economies and communities, and health for our planet. And there are plenty of profits in Food 2.0. They just come from healthy food. And so that's my vision. And, you know, I see a lot of activists around the world who are saying no to bad stuff. And there's plenty of bad stuff to say no to in the world right now, anywhere you look. But what excites me, what thrills me, what delights me is when we can say yes to what's possible, when we can stand for the possible world, the beloved community, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, and when we can bring our food choices and our life choices into alignment with what we truly want for our lives, for our economies, for our species, for our global future. And in our food choices right now, we have the opportunity to stand for the possible world. When you say no to food that's saturated in pesticides and GMOs and processed mumbo jumbo and added sugars and white flours and refined carbs and packaging, when you say yes at the same time to food that is grown with respect for the earth, with respect for animals, with respect for your body, that is high in phytonutrients and flavonoids and antioxidants and fiber, when you say yes to the good stuff and say no to the bad stuff, you are literally voting with your life for the kind of future you want. And that is so powerful in a world that can get so cynical and so depressing and so frustrating. This is a place where we can make a difference. We can make a difference for ourselves, and we can make a difference for the whole web of life on this planet. And so when I think about taking a stand for local living economies and self-reliant food systems, and when I shop at a farmer's market, I know that I am in my way participating in a world where someday, somehow, Kumba's people are also going to have more farmers markets. Because respect for local economies is spreading, because people care where their food was grown. They care how it was grown. They care what's in it. They care how it's going to affect their health. And as we stand and express and live that caring, we help to change the world.
I love it. I love it. Now, with your food revolution that you've been doing for the last 5 years, you have touched so many lives. Are there any stories of success that come to mind, just to give people an understanding of what kind of impact can we see just in our own health and our family's health if we make these changes? Do you have any stories that you remember, testimonials of success?
Sure, absolutely. There's so many of them. One of my favorites comes from a family practice doctor in Newberg, Oregon, named Pat. And Pat was, a practicing physician with, maybe about 15 employees in his office. And he was eating the standard American diet. And he was about 50 pounds overweight. And he had serious breathing problems and blood pressure issues and diabetes coming on. And what Pat did was he participated in a food revolution summit that we organized, where we interviewed some of the top food experts on the planet and shared their messages with the world. And he learned about whole foods, plant-based eating, and he was like shocked that he hadn't heard about any of this stuff in medical school and hadn't been sharing it with his patients, and that he'd been taking drugs and prescribing drugs, and he, like his patients, was getting sicker and sicker. And so he changed his diet, and he lost 50 pounds, and he got off his medications, and he felt so much better. And then he went a step further, and he transformed his medical practice from focusing on pills to focusing on health. And he now tries to help his patients stay out of his office and never need to come back, because he gives them the tools to empower themselves. Now, Pat, I'll be honest with you, Pat is struggling to make it work financially as a doctor, because he doesn't have as many patients anymore, because they don't need him as much anymore. And insurance companies reimburse based on pills and surgeries. They don't reimburse for spending an hour talking with someone about nutrition. But Pat is committed to figuring out a way to make it work financially to do the right thing. Because now that he understands what's at stake, he wants to, it's not acceptable to him to spend his life profiting off of a system that is dependent on sick care. Mm-hmm. He wants to provide health care. And I want to support him every step of the way, because we need so many doctors like Dr. Pat Spenceley who are standing for what's possible.
Wonderful. Well, we'll definitely include his name in the show notes of the podcast so that those in Oregon can check him out and fill his practice.
Yes.
Absolutely. The statistic that 1 in, 70% of adult Americans are on at least one prescription medication. Yeah. That sickens me, because that means that if you're on a prescription medication, it means that your body is crying out. It has symptoms, right? The naturopathic model of health is that symptoms are not healthy. Like someone goes, oh, I have asthma, or oh, I have arthritis and that just happens. I'm just old, or this just is in my family. And because the doctor, an MD, will tell them that, oh, these symptoms are normal, or it's just, oh, it's flu season, it's just normal to get, to get sick, or it's allergy season, it's normal to have allergies, but it's not. And these symptoms are the language of the body talking to us. So if you have migraines, if you have aches and pains, if you have digestive issues, it's not that you have a Pepto-Bismol deficiency, it's not that you have an Advil deficiency.
Right.
It's a your body is trying to communicate its needs with the only language it has, and its symptoms. And so if you have gas and bloating all the time, that's telling you there's something wrong, and the fuel you're putting in me is probably the cause. We got to look at the fuel, right? And then either we're not putting the right nutrition in, or we're putting the wrong stuff in. And so a lot of people will go to their doctor, and the doctor immediately gets them on a prescription medication. That's why 70% of adult Americans are on at least one prescription medication, meaning that 70% of our population is considered sick.
Yes.
That is horrible.
It is. And let's be clear here, 3/4 of medical spending in the United States goes towards managing lifestyle-caused chronic illness. 3/4. Medical expenses are the leading cause of bankruptcy for families. And they're actually threatening the financial viability of the entire nation of the U.S. The costs of Medicare in the United States are expected to double in the next generation. And meanwhile, the federal government in the U.S. provides tens of billions of dollars a year in subsidies for so-called commodity crops like corn, wheat, and soy, that are in turn processed into high fructose corn syrup, white flour, and animal feed for factory farms. So we're subsidizing the very things science tells us we should be eating less of with taxpayer dollars. And we're using it to fuel heading towards a fiscal cliff.
Right. And it's also destroying the environment. All those things are destroying our environment for future generations.
Well, it's true. I mean, modern food production practices are depleting our soil and our groundwater. They're polluting our water and our bodies with neurotoxic pesticides. They're endangering pollinators like bees and butterflies. They're depleting ecosystems, and they are the leading driving force behind climate change. So this is a food system that is bad for our economy, it's bad for our bodies, it's bad for our planet, it's inhumane, it's phenomenally cruel to animals. Meanwhile, the average farm worker in the United States has a life expectancy of 49 years. So there's just this rampant abuse and violence, and we're creating this food system that is causing epidemic rates of diabetes and heart disease and obesity and cancer, and it's sickening and killing millions. So, the status quo, I think, when I take a look at what's going on, and I'm sure you feel similarly, this is not okay. This is just not okay. It's not okay with me that 1/3 of our kids are expected to get diabetes in their lifetime. It's not okay with me that so many kids are growing up thinking it's their fault, that they're sick and fat and lethargic and can't focus in school. It's not okay with me that by the time the average kid graduates from grade school, they've already got a solid foundation of arteriosclerosis, that their arteries are already getting clogged, that the foundations are laid for a lifetime of heart disease. It's not okay with me that communities of color and low-income communities are being hit the hardest, that life expectancy and rates of diabetes and heart disease and obesity and cancer are all the worst in places where there's more poverty, because the poor have what we call food deserts. The people who can least afford to get sick are getting sick the most. And it's not okay with me to see animals being treated with unbelievable cruelty. And so in this context, we get a choice, right? We can participate in the status quo and eat ourselves to suffering and misery and take the planet down with us, or we can say enough is enough. I'm going to be a part of the solution. I'm going to be a food revolutionary. And this is what I want to just emphasize, is that this is happening. We are creating a food revolution. Sales of organic food have increased 26-fold in the last generation. They're 5% of market share now in the US. I mean, we got a long ways to go before we're at 100%, but it's a big change in a very short period of time. We've seen a threefold increase in farmers markets in the last decade. 9 US states and the entire European Union have banned gestational crates for pigs. Australia's two biggest supermarket chains only sell cage-free eggs. Certified non-GMO products have gone from nothing to $19 billion in sales in the last 5 years. And we're seeing that younger consumers are leading the way. Millennials are at the cutting edge of this. So I have a lot of hope, and I have a lot of grounded hope, and I see so many lives changing, and I think that there's a potential for a very bright future as we put what we're learning into practice.
Wonderful. So let's all join the food revolution. How do we do it? How do we join the food revolution? And walk us through some of the common misconceptions and the common concerns. Like, I just know right up front, people are going, I don't know how to cook. I don't have enough time. I'm so used to eating this one way. I mean, just the kind of the hurdle of going from however someone has been eating or cooking for their family to cooking a whole foods diet that's GMO free and organic sounds expensive. Sounds like it takes a really long time. Sounds like it takes a lot of skill. Can you help to shift our mindset so that people understand it's actually really cost effective and easier to cook a whole foods diet?
Well, it is. It can be. I mean, and I don't want to lie here that there is some effort involved in making a change. Anytime you've got a deeply rooted habit, it takes some time, attention, and energy to make a new habit. We only have a very small amount of willpower, actually. Most of what we do in our lives is a product of habits. Even speaking, we learned to talk when we were 1 or 2 or 3 years old, and now we speak using the neural pathways that were developed back then. And all of our words come out of that, right? So we develop habits all the time, and then they become our new normal. And when it comes to eating, we have some deep habits. And so creating change takes some attention, and the right use of willpower, I think, is not in fighting an uphill battle against bad habits, it's in making new habits. And that often requires incremental step-by-step change that you can last and stay with. So I say, get rid of some of the bad stuff. Choose the 3 worst offenders, 3 things that might be in your kitchen right now that aren't in keeping with your ethics or your integrity. For some people, that's going to be Doritos and Coca-Cola. For other people, that might be, not putting honey in your green tea in the morning. Whatever the step is, that's your next step in your food revolutionary life. See how you can move forward. Recognize that in a toxic food culture, we all have room for improvement. We all have places where we compromise, and that's okay. The question is, can you build momentum in the right direction? And can you keep moving? The food revolution isn't about a purity pact. It's not about getting to a destination and just setting up camp there. It's about a movement in our lives and a movement in our world. And ultimately, we want real food. We want organic food. We want whole food. We want plant-strong food. We want non-GMO food. We want humane food. We want fair trade food. These are all things that matter. They're all things that make a difference. And if I didn't mention local, that helps too. How can you put it into practice? Well, first of all, the top barriers people face typically are time, money, and confusion about what's really healthy and what's not. So let's look at those one by one. Mm-hmm. So with time, some of the top things you can do are to create some efficiencies around food. Now, most of the so-called fast foods and convenience foods in the dominant culture are junk foods. So you have to create other ways of having speed and convenience, like cooking in bulk, like food sharing programs where you get together with some other people in your life and you share a meal together. Or people at work. Maybe on Mondays you bring lunch for 5, and on Tuesdays someone else brings lunch for 5, and you create a little co-op basically like that. Or you and a neighbor get together and swap meals for each other once a week for dinner. Or you cook on Sunday a big pot of soup and you freeze some and you keep some in the fridge and you've got it for every other day for the next week. And you do your shopping once a week instead of once a day, so you don't spend as much time driving around and waiting in line, and you stock up on your staples. Or you can buy online from something like Thrive Market, which offers you 30 to 50% discounts off of retail prices, and the food gets delivered to your door. They don't sell fruits and vegetables, but they sell the non-perishable bulk staples. And then you can go to a farmer's market for the rest if you like, or join a community-supported agriculture program where once a week you pick up an order, and whatever the farm's growing that week, you get it, and you bring it home, and you incorporate that into your menu. So there's a lot of different ways to set up systems that will help over time. And another key thing is find some recipes you love that you can make over and over again. The 5th or 10th time that you make something, you can probably make it in a quarter of the time of the first time. Because anytime you're trying a new recipe, it takes thought, it takes attention. How do you get all the ingredients together? How much do you use? How do you like it? Once you get to know that, it gets faster and easier. So find a recipe you love that's healthy and make it once a week. Then add another one and keep going like that. In terms of money, I want to say, first off, that we do have subsidies of junk food, of commodities crops. And so we have a kind of unfair playing field. It's kind of like we're being fined for wearing our seatbelts. But at the same time, last time I checked, cancer was pretty expensive. Mm-hmm. Last time I checked, not having enough mental clarity to get through the day was pretty costly in terms of productivity and employment, how much people can make on the job. Last time I checked, being sick or obese or suffering from heart disease were pretty costly. So the reality is that choosing healthy food is maybe the best financial decision you could ever make in your life. It'll save you money in medical costs. It'll increase your productivity. It'll give you more energy. It'll add not just years to your life, but also life to your years. And that said, if you're looking at how to save money while eating healthy, here are some of the top tips. Number one, look sparingly at eating out. Most restaurants are fundamentally marking up their ingredients a lot in order to cover the costs of all the convenience, but also to make their profits. So, making your own food can be one step. And then look at some of the big staples you can base your diet around that aren't expensive. I'm talking about things like on the vegetable front, like cabbage and carrots and onions and mushrooms that are kind of some of the real superfoods. And then in terms of, staples basing around lots of legumes and quinoa even, whole grains, it isn't that expensive. In fact, it can be remarkably affordable to base your diet around whole natural foods. And then, in terms of confusion, let me just break down for you my take on the medical literature. I've spent a lot of time studying medical studies and talking to leading edge doctors and hearing their take. And I'll say that there actually is not much confusion among serious scientists about what human beings should be eating. Among the people who actually look at the data, it's pretty clear. We need to eat less processed sugar. We need to eat less processed carbs and white flours. We need to eat less factory farmed animal products. We need to eat less factory farmed dairy in particular, and less chemicals. And what do we need to eat more of? Well, we need to eat more legumes and fruits and vegetables, and for many people, whole grains, and nuts and seeds. If you're going to eat animal products, fish, probably best to have it be wild fish that's low mercury, like sardines or salmon. And if you're going to eat meat, make sure that it's pasture raised. But in general, the data is pretty clear that while we could argue about whether it's best to be 95% plant-based or 100% plant-based, it's clear that as a society, we need to eat a lot less animal products. And this is based on thousands of medical studies that have shown in no uncertain terms that by eating a whole foods, plant-strong diet, we can radically transform our health.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love your suggestion of cooking in bulk, taking something like brown rice, soaking it overnight, taking your nuts and soaking them overnight. I cannot believe how delicious cashews and almonds taste after having been soaked in water and releasing the phytic acid. And actually then brown rice cooks a lot faster when you've soaked it, but I cook a big pot, enough for the whole week. And then you can make a stir fry out of it, you can make a wrap out of it, you can make, there's so many different recipes with a big pot of brown rice and or quinoa. Like you said, you can make a giant thing of quinoa, and there's so many things you can do with quinoa. You can make desserts out of it. You can make breakfasts out of it, and stir fries, and that really does save on the time. I used to in the past when I cooked, I would choose, and I think a lot of families do this, they choose the protein. Like, okay, I'm cooking chicken tonight, I'm cooking beef tonight, I'm cooking, tofu, whatever the protein is, and then they kind of build the meal around the protein. Now I've switched my mind totally. I choose the vegetables. I go into my fridge and go, okay, what do I got to eat up before it goes bad? I grab the cabbage and definitely grab the mushrooms, because even a half a cup of mushrooms a day has a major immune boosting properties and anti-cancer properties, and the cabbage and the kale, and so I'll grab a bunch of vegetables, and then I plan my entire dinner around the vegetables I'm cooking, and then the carbs would be like a side, like an afterthought. Like, okay, now I've got some brown rice back there. I'll warm that up, or maybe I'll make some kale wraps or something like that. And then the protein is kind of this side as well. And the major part of the plate is all these vegetables. And I always cook too much, because then the next day you can just throw it in and make a stir fry out of it, and then in 5 minutes I have lunch for everyone, because I cook once, eat twice. So yeah, absolutely. I love
That's
those.
Exactly right. That's exactly right.
And for me, I reversed my diabetes. I had type 2 diabetes, and I reversed it naturally with changing my eating habits, and also taking some supplements, because I wasn't getting all the minerals I needed at the time. And between those two things, I completely reversed diabetes. And now I get a gold star every time I go see my naturopath and get my blood panel, because I have absolutely perfect blood sugar. But 10 years ago, I was a wreck. I was such a wreck. So for those who are listening who have diabetes, considering how prevalent diabetes is, it's absolutely, type 2 diabetes is absolutely reversible 100% with nutrition. And what was really interesting is that there was a study done where they kind of calculated that the average diabetes patient, the cost per year is about $12,000. And they made it seem like this cost to the system. But really, if you look at it, they always go, oh, the cost of cancer is this much, but really it's the profit. The profit to the mainstream medical system per diabetes patient is $12,000 between, and so they're invested in keeping us sick. They're not invested in educating the doctor, in teaching the patient on how to eat a whole foods diet and how to reverse diabetes naturally. They're invested in how to keep them on insulin, keep them on metformin. There's a way to cure diabetes, and that is not something that they have an invested interest in spreading that information. But I do, and you do. So for those listeners who have diabetes or have loved ones with diabetes, absolutely reversible with nutrition, and there's no need to have to be on these drugs. We can completely get our lives back, especially through what Ocean described today, which is to move away from those processed foods and towards the whole foods. Could you give us an example? What's an average day for you? I'd love for the listeners to kind of understand. Share what your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, and maybe a snack or a dessert looks like on an average day for you.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you my favorite breakfast. I don't have this every day, but I love it when I do. So the night before I prepare, I will soak chia seeds, like a quarter cup of chia seeds, in either soy milk, or sometimes I actually make homemade soy yogurt. But I soak that, maybe a couple cups of soy milk or soy yogurt, and I add like a tablespoon of maple syrup and a cup of blueberries, sometimes just frozen blueberries, or fresh if we happen to be lucky enough to have some in season at that time. And then I add maybe a teaspoon or probably about a half teaspoon of vanilla to that, and a dash of salt. Stir it up a couple of times as the chia seeds are thickening. And then the next morning, I've got a ready-to-go breakfast, and it is delicious. Sometimes I'll sprinkle in some nuts, by the way, as well. And I am getting, tremendous infusion of omega-3 fatty acids and fiber, protein, and not to mention the phenomenal cancer-fighting, antioxidant-packed potency of blueberries, all to start off the day. And it tastes great. It's like this delicious porridge. So that's my favorite breakfast. I often drink green tea during the day. Sometimes I drink some coffee. I've been stunned by the nutritional benefits of green tea and coffee in many studies. So I don't try to avoid them. I look for what amount of caffeine my body can handle, but I do know that there's a lot of health benefits to those particular foods. And I enjoy herbal teas too. My wife is big on green smoothies, so she'll often make me a smoothie that I will enjoy in the morning. She blends up some nuts and some kale from our garden, some fruit, some bananas, and whatever fruit we have right now. We've got nectarines from some trees that we are lucky enough to have planted 10 years ago. So we'll blend all that up, and that's, I have like a pint of that and some tea and coffee and maybe some herbal tea. And then for lunch, I like today, for example, I'm having a mix of buckwheat and pumpkin, sauteed pumpkin seeds and kale and some legumes that mixed with some delicious seasonings. And this is actually last night's dinner.
Oh, it sounds so good.
And it's today's lunch. And it's delicious.
Nice.
And I pack it up in a nice metal container with a silicone sealing lid, snap it up and take it off to work with me. And have that when I'm hungry for lunch. And then for a snack, I may have some trail mix or some nuts at some point during the day. And then I'm not sure what we'll do for dinner tonight. But you already know what I had for dinner last night. And we make big salads in our house. And we always have salad first, and then we have some vegetables, and then we have what some people might think of as the main course, although I like to think of it as, the third course, because the main course is probably the vegetables. We have kids. They're 16 years old, twins. And for the last 10 years or so, we've been in the habit of, while I'm making supper, I'll often put out on the table a nice steamed pot of vegetables of some kind. And they like it as finger food. They'll just walk through and grab some flowers of cauliflower or, pieces of broccoli and just munch while we're hanging out, while dinner's getting made. It's so much better than grabbing the chips or other kind of snacks that people often have when they're hungry.
Genius. That's genius. I love it. My 2-year-old is obsessed with vegetables. I feel so blessed. I kind of have an ulterior motive, so I've been kind of pushing vegetables on him since he was like 3 months old. But he will tear the kale out of the grocery bag because it's like beside him in the car seat. And by the time we get home, he'll have like gone through half a bushel of kale. He loves broccoli raw or steamed. And he loves carrots. And so, it's just genius to have that right there already made so that while you're cooking the rest of the meal, so the kids can fill up on that rather than, like you said, the potato chips and the junky food. Because I think we don't, like you said, we have a limited amount of willpower. It is when we are hungry that all willpower disappears.
That's right. And one of the key ways to change what you eat is to change what you buy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to look at it as kind of this inventory of look at where do you shop, what do you buy, how do you prepare food, and how do you eat food? And in all 4 of those areas, we can examine, what our values are and what we want to create. And just to summarize briefly, where you shop is important because if you're shopping in establishments that feature and profit from the sale of junk food, then you're surrounding yourself with negative temptations. That's why shopping with filtered online sites like Thrive Market can be helpful because you can actually filter out things that you don't want. So you only see the organic things or the non-GMO things or the sugar-free things or dairy-free things or whatever you want. And you're not even exposed to temptations for other stuff. And farmers markets can be so good because obviously there's a lot of filtering. And by definition, there's not a lot of processed stuff at farmers markets. So where you shop is important, and it's also making a statement or casting a vote for the kind of economy you want. And then what you buy is obviously a big deal. And there, one of the critical tools is actually to use a shopping list and then stick with the shopping list because impulse purchasing can be up to half of the purchases that many people make. And there is a reason why supermarkets, and even natural food stores put candy bars and junky foods right by the checkout stand
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of impulse buying that happens where people grab that stuff as they're walking by. And it's profitable for the store, but it's not profitable for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can stick with the shopping list, then you are going to make wiser choices that are thought through in advance instead of being at the whim of those kind of impulse purchases that are often more an expression of addiction and habit than of will or actual intention for our lives. And then when it comes to preparing food, obviously, having good recipes, finding what you like, planning ahead, making good meals and cooking in quantity. These are all tips that can help. And then I want to say a word to eating food and enjoying it. Did you know that you actually begin digestion the moment you smell food? The moment you look at it, the moment you think about it, your stomach is already responding. Have you ever had a moment where you think about something and your stomach just goes, I want that, right? Or a moment when you think about something else and you get an upset stomach?
Mm.
That's actually real. Your stomach is secreting juices and engaging in responses. And so the more we can attune to our body's native wisdom, not our enculturated habit patterns, but our actual body's native wisdom, then we become more powerful and more aligned. And your body does have a deep wisdom embedded in your cells. Now, the food industry has become very good at tricking us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for example, our body likes sweet fruit because it knows that ripe fruit is good for us. But then the food industry gives us sweet junk, and our bodies can be fooled by the sugars because we evolved to think that sweet was good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And bitter was often the poisonous things. But nowadays we've got a whole other dynamic going on. So it does take some rewiring to and some way that our minds and bodies have to work in concert. But when we are actually aligned with our own best interests, then our lives become more beautiful and more vibrant, and we become more powerful as expressions of our own well-being. And saliva is one of the places where that happens. When you chew, when you smell, when you savor, when you enjoy your food, you digest it better.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get more nutrients from the calories you consume. And you'll have more pleasure in your life. So I'm a big fan of slowing down a little bit around food. You know, in our hyper processed, hyper sped up world, food often becomes something we kind of shovel in. And it takes an hyper saturation of taste bud overwhelm to even notice that we're eating it all. But when we slow down a little bit, we become more sensitive. And that sensitivity is part of our strength and part of our wisdom.
You know, in saying that, you reminded me that there's a statistic that between 5 and 10% of Americans suffer with a binge eating, overeating, binge eating, emotional eating, that kind of all. It's those things kind of cross over each other. They're very, very similar. And they think that it might even be a higher number, but that so many people aren't willing to come forward and say that they have this problem because there's so much shame and guilt. But what they don't realize is those who binge eat, maybe they sit in their car and they've ordered 2 or 3, meals at a fast food restaurant, the drive-through, and they sit there and they binge eat in their car. What they don't realize is that their body has been tricked by the chemicals, and a lot of it is not their fault. I mean, the way the marketing of food is, the way the chemicals in the food, like MSG is a toxin that stimulates the brain to crave it and to remember those flavors and crave them. And so it's almost like we're eating heroin. And it's not, I mean, of course, I want everyone to take personal responsibility for their life. Like, I wouldn't want to say an addict, it's not their fault they're an addict, but if it was pushed on them, if heroin was pushed on them and then their body became addicted, in some way they're a bit of a victim of that circumstance, and they're caught in that cycle of having to fight a huge addiction. And now we are, a majority of our population is fighting it feels like they're in a fight with their own body because they're fighting this food addiction, but it's not food, it's the chemicals that they're lacing our food with. It's essentially like they're tricking us, like with drugs, just like with heroin. I had a food chemist on the show. She calls herself the food sommelier because she's gone from being a food chemist and actually working on brands like Doritos to now being 100% about healthy foods. And what she said is like with Doritos, for example, you take a corn chip which has almost no flavor, and they had to add about 25 artificial chemicals to it to make it palatable, to make it taste good, to trick the body into thinking it's good. But she says broccoli, for example, has 1,000 of those chemicals that are all natural. So when you really sit and, like you said, savor and slow down and eat that vegetable, and almost like you're trying to taste a wine, right? A fine wine. Taste that broccoli like you're trying to understand the complex palate. You begin to realize that there's so many more flavors available to us to explore in vegetables than there are in the artificial foods, and then our palate begins to change. And we begin to really savor and really enjoy and crave the carrots and the broccoli, and not crave like the hectic heroin like cravings of junk food, but the body begins to speak to us loud enough that we begin to finally hear our body. Like you said, the body speaks its wisdom to us. And then we begin to hear the body goes, oh, today I feel like broccoli. I need some of those phytonutrients. Oh, today I feel like I need the phytonutrients of this food or that food. And so we can start to actually nourish our body based on its nutrient needs. And that's really cool because we're empowering people then to really be in touch with the body's needs in terms of healing it. Now, you've got this great website, foodrevolution.org. What do my listeners get out of going to your website? What should they do once they land on your website, foodrevolution.org?
Well, the first thing you should do when you go to foodrevolution.org is you should look for the Join Us button in the top right and click there and get a free real food action guide we put together, and by entering your name and email, and then you'll be on our email list so you can be with us long term. And then go ahead and scroll through and you'll see hundreds of articles on critical topics, from superfoods, real superfoods that you can eat to help fight disease, to how to teach kids to eat and love healthy foods, to recent studies and how to fight acid reflux, and how hospitals are changing, real truth about GMOs, and what does it mean that Amazon is planning to buy Whole Foods, and how might it impact your life? And we look at topical issues, and we look at political and social issues, and most of all, we look at how we can empower individuals with the knowledge they need to choose health. So again, that's foodrevolution.org. And once you're on our email list, we'll tell you about all kinds of projects and events. We have an annual Food Revolution Summit where we interview top food experts and share breaking insights with the world for free. We have an online course called Plant Powered and Thriving that we release a couple times a year that focuses kind of on the how side of healthy eating. But most of all, I want to say, you know what? You are a part of us. Whether or not you ever go to foodrevolution.org, you are a part of us every time you choose real food over processed junk. Every time you say yes to more local, natural, humane, sustainable, fair trade, organic, non-GMO certified foods. Every time you opt to share healthy food with a loved one. Every time you get informed, you get inspired, and you get empowered, you are a part of the food revolution. And step by step, one shopping at a time, one meal at a time, one bite at a time, we're actually changing the world together. And so I want to thank you for joining with us, for standing with us, for eating with us, for working with us, for the health and the healthy food future that we all deserve.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I have two more questions.
Okay.
My first is that I have a lot of wonderful naturopaths and massage therapists and holistic healthcare practitioners from a variety of different backgrounds that listen to the show. I'd love for you to speak to those healthcare practitioners who have patients and have clients. What message would you like to leave them?
Well, I want to say thank you for caring for the whole being of your patients, because we have a medical system that is dominant today that so often looks at the human body as if it was a car that needs to be repaired, rather than life that needed to be loved and fed and nurtured and cared for. But we're not machines. We're animate creatures. And so it's time we started treating our bodies with love and care so that they don't have to get sick in the first place. So I think the whole concept of holistic health is to look at the whole organism, the whole person, and quite frankly, the ecosystem within which it resides. Because, you can't be vibrantly healthy on a dead planet. When our food system is saturated with pesticides, when our air and water are polluted, you think it's possible to be super healthy? Of course not. So we ultimately have a stake in the course of things on this planet. And so I think that increasingly, the practice of medicine is going to be seen in the times to come as in a holistic context that looks at human beings as part of a community, and that looks at food as not just a commodity, but also a community. We are in a web of relationships that connects us to all of life. What we eat, how we love, how we live literally becomes us and shapes our destiny. So when you bring your food choices and your life choices into integrity with your values and with what you really want for your life and your world, then your life has a deeper sense of meaning, and your thoughts get more clear, and your world gets more congruent. And so for everybody who's a professional who is helping patients, I want to say thank you. And thank you for looking at the bigger picture of how you can help create a life, a lifestyle, and an ecosystem that supports health.
Wonderful, wonderfully said. All the links to everything that Osher Robbins does is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast. So definitely check that out, learntruehealth.com. Now, my last question to you, and my dear friend and I were talking before I got on Skype with you, and she's a big fan of yours. So it was really cool hearing how the kind of impact you've had on her life. She's been following you since your Yes Day. And what she was so impressed by is your family life. You've been with your wife for many, many years, and to see someone who's so grounded in a healthy relationship with wonderful children. And she said she could really tell that you're a loving husband and a loving father. Now that your kids are 16, that was kind of a monumental. In my mind, I imagine that was a monumental age for you, because that's when you launched Yes. And so now you get to look, and your children are now 16. What kind of impact are they looking to have on the world, and are they carrying the torch with you, or how is that affecting you now, looking back and realizing that your children are the same age as you were when you first sort of began this journey?
Right. Well, it's parenting is a very interesting path. In my life, it's been a path that has been about unconditional love and also about a lot of surrender. My kids were both born 9 weeks prematurely, and they have been special needs from the get-go. In fact, they didn't talk until they were 5 or 6 or 7. They didn't walk till really late. Everything was kind of delayed, and we had a lot of experts saying that not only were they autistic, but they might never speak, and they were incapable of empathy, and all these painful things. But we have chosen to love them as the miracles that they are, and to delight in them, and instead of pathologizing them, to see the beauty that's there, and participated starting about 7 years ago in a program called Sonrise, SONRISE, that basically focuses on, instead of trying to pull autistic people into our world, we join them in their world. The idea is that they show us the door in, and then we can show them the door out. And so by building relationship with them, we've experienced miracles. They composed a few years back their own I Have a Dream speeches for Martin Luther King Day, and delivered them on our porch for a bunch of friends, and it became this YouTube sensation. Because these autistic twins were sharing their dream for the world they wanted. They have incredible love to give. They love healthy food. They went to summer camp a couple years ago, and Bodhi came back, and I said, "How was summer camp?" He said it was great, but there was only one problem. I said, "What?" He said, the food. And I got all worried. I was like, oh, did he take up a liking for Doritos? And he said, yeah, they didn't serve enough vegetables. said, he said, I really miss vegetables. I said, I had a good time anyway, but I missed the vegetables. He said, could we have vegetables tonight? And we made a big pot of vegetables and he ate them all. And I thought, I felt proud of him for like three reasons right there. Number one, because he had fun anyway, despite the fact that the food wasn't what he normally liked. Number
Mm-hmm.
two, he missed vegetables. And number three, he took action and ate vegetables. And so, our kids are total miracles. I love them with all my heart. Um, and they have certain challenges. Some things are struggles for them. Their brains don't filter out sensory input the ways that neurotypical people do. And so they can
Mm-hmm.
easily get hypersaturated and overwhelmed with excessive stimulation. So they need a lot of downtime. They need a lot of peace. They need a lot of control, experience of control in their lives in order to feel safe. And then when they get that, their genius and their love and their generosity shines forth. They're proud of the work that I do. They're total passionate food revolutionaries. They're also teenage boys who are excited about celebrities and pop culture and country music and music in general. And so they're always advising me on which people we should interview. Whenever they learn of a pop star who's eating healthy food or who lost some weight, they want to tell me all about it. So they're very interested in how they can bridge their teenage pop culture world with my concerns. But I just totally adore them. I love them with all my heart. And we live in a society that sometimes kind of judges people based on test scores, based on how much money they make, based on how quote successful they are unquote. And I think that none of those things can measure how much someone deserves love. I think everybody deserves
Oh.
all the love in the world. And I know my kids do. And loving them has taught me about unconditional love and whether I can turn that inward, whether I can love myself for who I am, not just for what I do. And, when I work with people in the food revolution, we work with all kinds of folks, some people who are vibrant and healthy and some people who are really suffering. Sometimes people are called into change because they're hurting.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids have taught me a lot about compassion. Rather than judging somebody for their pain, thinking that it's their fault, you never know what someone has been through. You never know what traumas they've endured. You never know what neurological challenges they may be facing right now. And instead of judging and pathologizing what we don't understand, I think it's time we bring some love and compassion there. And I find that things become more beautiful when we love them.
Oh, that is so well said. My one follow up question to that is since starting the food revolution, I kind of get a sense you guys have always been eating healthy, especially from your father and your mom and how you were raised. But in creating the food revolution, have you seen a shift in your children through eating this wonderful organic whole foods lifestyle, or in this way of eating, do those who are on the spectrum often see a shift in their mental clarity and their I'm not sure quite how to put it, but
Sure.
do you see that there is a positive impact and another reason for parents who have children who are on the spectrum to go this route because it makes such a difference?
Well, I mean, I think that it makes a difference for everybody
Mm-hmm.
to be conscious of food and to choose healthy food. And the more sensitive somebody is, the more difference it could make. And we
Mm-hmm.
have countless medical studies showing that people, ADHD rates go down when kids eat healthier food. That even in prison populations, when prisoners were fed healthier diet, their recidivism rates dropped. That
Mm.
they were more likely to make it in the outside world after prison. And in juvenile detention centers, kids were given a healthy diet, and the rates of truancy and violence went down. Um, Test scores have gone up in school districts when they've offered healthier school lunches. So we know for a fact that what we eat matters to academic performance. It matters to uh, all mental illness. It matters to all kinds of challenges people can face in their lives. Now, in our case, yes, we've always been feeding our boys the best diet they could possibly have, and we've experimented along that way with many different kinds of things. And but the bottom line is that I would hate to think where they would be if they hadn't had that. I'm so glad they
Mm.
have.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't get to have a test study here, because now they're identical twins. So I suppose if we were truly passionate about science, we could have raised the two of them differently, and one could have gotten, a really healthy diet, and one could have gotten the standard American diet. But we love them too much to do that, so we didn't follow that test. But there is a lot of data out there, and I think it's pretty clear that the more sensitive kids are, the more important it is that they not be given large doses of sugar and chemicals. And there are links to various food additives, preservatives, flavorings, colorings that are associated with negative mental stability. And so by the same token, when you clean up the diet, you contribute to the best chances for a healthy life. And I think one of the points here is that we're all going to die, right? Life is a terminal condition, and we're all going to have some suffering along the way. There is no diet that's, a panacea, that's a cure-all for all suffering ever. But as long as we're alive, let's live the best we can. Let's optimize our chances of having the most vibrant, healthy, beautiful life possible. I want that for me. I want that for my kids. And I want that for everybody who's listening right now. That we take the opportunities, the choices that we do have. There's a lot we don't have control over. You can't choose your in-laws. You can't even choose your kids, actually. And you certainly can't choose your president. We can vote, but we don't really decide who's in power. You can't choose, who the billionaires are going to be and what they're going to do with all their money. You can't choose what the media is going to decide is important or not. But you know what? You can choose what you put in your body. And let's make that a good choice.
Wonderful. It has been such a pleasure having you on the show. I know all my listeners are revved up to join your food revolution. Please go to foodrevolution.org. And please, if this interview with Ocean touched you in some way, I know it definitely moved me. If you were moved in some way, share this episode. Let's get this out there. Let's turn this ripple into a tidal wave. Let's make the biggest difference we can. Please share this episode with as many friends as you can, and let's turn this food revolution into the main staple of everyone's diet. There's this tipping point, right? When we get a certain percentage of the population, I think it's like 10% or 15%, but it's just when we just get enough people on board, all of a sudden it just spreads like wildfire, right? And just like you said with organic in one generation, how it's increased so much, and non-GMO sales are in the, what is it, billions?
It's $19 billion a year in the U.S.
I can't even fathom that. $19 billion. We are making a difference, but it's still a small percentage. We need to tip the scales. So share this episode with as many people as possible. Get your friends and family to go to foodrevolution.org and share this interview today with Ocean Robbins. And let's make a difference for our health and for the future generations, because we really want our grandkids to be healthier than we are today. That's for sure, especially when 1 in 2 women in their lifetime will experience cancer, and when the obesity rate and the diabetes rate, when more people are obese than aren't, when more people have diabetes than don't, when more people have cancer than don't. We have to make a difference. We have to start now. We have to vote with our fork. Thank you so much, Ocean, for coming on the show and sharing this information. And thank you so much for dedicating your life. And thank you to your father as well for dedicating his life to making a difference. I know that because of the work that you're doing, you are absolutely saving so many lives. And that is so moving. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Enjoy what you heard today on your episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Did something move you, inspire you? Did you get great information that's going to change your life? Awesome. That's exactly what I'm here to do, is to help you gain your health back. Please turn around and share this. If this is something that's helped you in any way, share this with those you love. Love the Learn True Health podcast and want to support us? Awesome. You can go to takeyoursupplements.com and you can support us that way. You'll get access to amazing supplements that are just really great quality for a great price. And there'll be someone on the other end of the line to help you pick out your supplements that are right for you. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Or join our membership. LearnTrueHealth.com/join. That's another great way to support our podcast, support our movement, and you'll be supporting yourself. Gain more information, wonderful videos, wonderful trainings, and you'll also be able to share those with those you love as well. So go to LearnTrueHealth.com/join. Want something fun for free? Go to LearnTrueHealth.com, and right there on the front page, you'll see where you can get our free cookbook. I spent a lot of time making it, and it was so much fun. It's really delicious, healthy recipes. And you can also get our 7-day doctor course. Right there, it's 7 days of naturopathic videos sent right to your inbox, and you can learn from top naturopaths on how to gain health naturally. So that's takeyoursupplements.com for wonderful supplements. LearnTrueHealth.com/join to join our awesome membership, which is only open for a limited time. You can get our free healthy cookbook, and you can also get for free 7 days of wonderful naturopathic videos sent to you. Just go to LearnTrueHealth.com and you'll see it right there on the front page. Thank you so much for being a listener, and thank you for sharing and helping others. Let's spread this information and turn this ripple into a tidal wave.